I'm Jess Rakowski, and I currently work as a resource teacher in the Office of English Language Arts, and I support elementary schools and elementary school teachers and for Baltimore County Public Schools.
Got it. So are you coaching now? You're coaching schools?
Yeah, so my job is kind of like three parts. So I write curriculum that goes out to our schools. I do professional development and design professional development, and then I actually coach teachers.
Love it. Love it. Paying it forward. Yes, ma'am. Megan, introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Okay, I'm Megan Shea. I am currently the Executive Director of Academics for Baltimore County Public Schools, which means that I oversee the curricular and instruction offices for all of the academic content areas.
That's a big job.
Yeah, it was really hard to get her. She's a busy lady.
We'll make it fast because I know you have a lot on your to-do list. Thank you for making the time to be here.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. So, as you know, and as the folks who are watching this know, I sent out an email to everybody that we communicate with all the time about I want to hear your coaching stories. And 2 people responded. You, Jess, are one of them. And I interviewed the other coaching duo, and we had the duo yesterday. We got both of them on as well. So I just feel so lucky and so thankful for that. But this is what you wrote. You said, when I started out as a classroom teacher in Baltimore County, each school had a mentor teacher who served as a coach for all of the untenured teachers in the building. I would not be the teacher I am today without the mentoring of my coach, Megan Shea. In addition to teaching me best practices for instruction, one of the biggest lessons I learned was about how to interact with kids and to build relationships. I taught at a challenging Title I school on the city line and encountered many kids who came from rough backgrounds. Megan taught me how to be not only a teacher, but also a social worker, an advocate, a caregiver, and friend to the kids who needed it. When things got really hard and I felt like I wasn't making a difference, she said, okay, you might not make a difference for every kid, but say you changed one child's life. You changed one child's life for the better. Would it be all worth it? Of course, the answer was and still is yes. My coach is now the interim director of academics for our county, and I work as a resource teacher in the Office of ELA. I squeeze every ounce of coaching I can still get out of her, like right now, when she's not doing one of her many jobs. As I coach other teachers in my current position, I remember the power my coach had on my practice and career and hope I can provide some of that for other teachers. So, of course, I cried when I first read it because I'm like, this is what it's all about, right? This is what it's all about. So I just have a few questions for you guys as a way to encourage other coaches. And the first one is for you, Megan, how did you start coaching? And then I'll ask the same thing for you, Jess.
So I think actually I started coaching kind of without knowing it was a thing when I was a classroom teacher, because I think as a teacher, I always saw the potential in trying to help other teachers in filling their practice. So whether it was a brand new teacher who had the classroom next door to me or across the hall. But then through my career, I actually at one point had the position that Jess has now. So talk about life coming full circle. So that was my first opportunity where that was actually my role, was to coach. And so I did that as part of the language arts office. And what really hooked me was this idea of having an impact on not only the teachers, the students that they had in front of them, but then all the future children that they would touch, and trying to help facilitate that. Because I think one of the biggest myths about teaching that people don't understand is that teaching is really hard. And I think it can be heartbreaking sometimes because you pour so much into it. And I think as a coach, what I really liked about was the potential to help shape their decision making, you know, when working with lots of different teachers and the impact that they have with kids. So I took a position, and at the time it was called a mentor. We had mentor positions in the county, and so that's where I met Jess. So I was the mentor teacher assigned to Dundalk Elementary School. And my job was to work with any of the non-tenured teachers as part of our support the system gives to non-tenured teachers in the hopes of promoting teacher retention and also just teacher success. So that was where I met Jess. And that was the first opportunity where that was like my entire responsibility was around coaching.
Had you come straight from the classroom, or did you have other things in between?
Yeah, so I went from the classroom to being in the role Jess is in now, where I was a resource teacher in curriculum office, which has sort of a coaching and curricular dual role. And then when I went back to, I missed being with kids every day. So when I went back to a school, that's when I took the position as the mentor.
Good. And then just tell us how you are in the position you're in now. And then we'll get back to how you guys coach together.
So I follow Megan around like a lost puppy dog.
I think she's the right person to follow around.
Yeah, I know, right? So I was teaching at Dundalk Elementary, and I similarly, Megan, after she was the mentor there, she became the assistant principal.
Okay.
And so one of the things that she really encouraged me to do as I was getting more comfortable, was to start doing professional development and helping new teachers and that piece. And when I got to a point where I was kind of like ready for something different, like I knew that I had kind of outgrown where I was and I wanted to learn more, but I wasn't really sure what to do. And these positions had opened up. And at that point, Megan had moved, and she was the director of English Language Arts. And there were some positions open, and I was like, well, I could follow Megan to English Language Arts and do something really different and also kind of cool. And that's kind of how I ended up here. And it's been really cool because I really wanted to kind of grow in my practice, and doing this work, I've really grown exponentially. Since I've been here, in terms of what I've learned. And, when you're a teacher, you're like in your little room, you're like in your little box, and you don't really know what's going on outside of your box. And
you assume that what's going on is exactly what you're doing.
It's the same.
And you're like, no, they're not all doing it the way I'm doing.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, like, Jess underplays it. I came and got her. I mean, I actually came back to school and said, I really think this is something you should do, and you're ready for it. And I think at first, Jess was like, no, what do I know? But I think what she was underselling is that what was happening in her classroom is not what happens in every other classroom, because teachers do sometimes get overwhelmed or do lose sight of kind of the overall purpose. And Jess has a gift for understanding kids and understanding how to reach kids and building relationships with adults. And so she didn't just follow me, I came and got her. And then I came and said, I really want you to think about doing this, because I think teachers, to me, coaches are sort of the lifeline for teachers, for new teachers or struggling teachers. And I knew that Jess had a real passion for teaching and learning that I thought could be a spark for a teacher that maybe was struggling or kind of losing sight of the purpose. And so I convinced her to come do this.
I love it. So you can affect many more people. And I think, with the coach and teacher duo that I talked to yesterday, and then with you guys, the thing that's coming through is the word passion, that just really excited about what we get to do. Like, that matters, right?
Absolutely.
And then the other thing is, you didn't say this, but what I really see in my own practice, but I also hear through what you're saying, is once you know coaching's worked for you and how well it's worked for you, then you're like unashamed to go out and do it, right? You don't feel as like tiptoey as you maybe would if you hadn't experienced it yourself. So I think that's so neat that you can now carry that to other people and just be like, just go do it. It changed my life. Like, we can go and change other people's lives. We don't have to be timid about the power of it,
Yeah.
So I'm going to take you back to when you were coach and teacher, way back when you didn't have the weight of the district on your shoulder.
I think she liked to go back
there.
there.
Then, right?
Yeah,
like, I thought I was stressed back then. Oh my gosh. It's different stress, right? How did you start coaching? So Megan, when you were going into like Jess's class for the first time, how did you start? That is the most common question I get, or the biggest struggle that coaches have, is like, how do I just get going? And how did you get going with Jess?
So I think one of the first things that I think is really important is you have to get to know them as people. So I think spending time with them and just really listening, and because how you coach different individuals can't be the same.
Right.
And so I think the first thing I did was just try to spend a lot of time with Jess and be in her classroom and get to know her kids. when Jess first started teaching, she was a late hire, and so she didn't have her own class. She taught like a math production group where she pulled kids from lots of different classes. And then I was teaching actually. So they had the principal at the time had a group of 5th grade students who were almost like the Bad News Bears baseball team. These were kids who just had everything going against them and just really had a lot of struggles. And the principal put them all in one class and gave me 90 minutes and was like, please try to teach them how to read. Essentially. So Jess actually spent time with me in my classroom. And so I think that was a great way to coach because I was able to coach by doing.
Yeah.
So I was coaching in her classroom in the morning where we were actually, that was more the afternoon, where I was kind of the facilitator and sort of helping her on that side. But then I was also modeling for her. Mm-hmm. So I think, and as Jess talked about, I would say I started just by kind of jumping in and being in her classroom and saying, could I try this with you? Or I'd say, can I pull this small group and just model or show you this one part? And then flipping it and doing it with my kids. And we sort of had like a Doogie Howser thing going on where I would talk to her, I would teach the class, and then I would turn to Jess and say, so see what I just did there? Or did you notice, or what do you think about? And kind of talk to her that way so that she would sit in the back with a notebook, like taking notes, like as we were talking, and also just, I think that's where a lot of coaching in response to children and learning how to be who they were, because so much of what I did with that class was about more than just reading instruction. At one point, in probably about November or December, Chad said to me, she's like, I realize this class is kind of like.
I lost your video real quick.
Oh,
did you lose your video?
I can see you, but you're frozen.
Okay. And then you guys, I lost your video.
Okay.
There we go. It should be, there we go. Okay, keep going.
Okay. So I was saying that Jess, we coined our class like the How to Be a Human class. I think she froze. No, she froze. So I would say just spending a lot of time with her, getting to know her as a person, listening. I think coaching kind of really starts with listening instead of just saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, but really just listening. And then I think just modeling and doing it myself for her, I guess.
I would agree. I think you are, again, echoing what the gals I talked to yesterday said that we know is true, but we're hearing it directly from the coach's mouth, that how important it is to model, but model with the teacher's kids. So it's like there's no leap that they have to make, right? It's like, I'm not going to make you imagine what this is like. I'm going to show you what it is like, right? Mm-hmm. So just for you, we know where your relationship between the two of you is now, but how did Megan build trust with you? Because that's also it's a really difficult thing, and it can seem kind of mushy, kind of out there, but like, what are specific things that she did where you thought, okay, I can trust her and she's invested in me?
I'm trying to think. So I think early on, I think I always knew that Megan had my back.
Okay.
And I knew that I think also as a new teacher, I was really overwhelmed by a lot of things early on. And so each of these things, she would kind of like talk me through, and she really would like I think like she said, she would experience them with me. So if I had a behavior issue and I couldn't quite figure it out, she's like, well, let's try this, right? And she was a part of the trying it. So I would try it, but she would be there as I was trying it. It wasn't like, go try this, and then a couple of weeks later, how did it work? She was really a part of the trying it. And I think that was really important. I also think that, I think that we developed a friendship beyond the coaching relationship. And so because of that, when the email went out, I thought of Megan because I think of her as a coach, but I've never really called her a coach before, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah.
She's like my Megan, you know what I mean? And so, but that's ultimately what she was. And so I think that
that relationship that we built, the fact that I knew that she was going to be side by side with me as we try different hurdles. And one of the things I say to teachers all the time is like, I don't know what the right answer is right now. I can think of a possible answer that might work, but we have to ultimately get in there and try it and see what happens. And it could very well fail, and then that's okay. And then we try something different. And I feel like one of the wonderful things that Megan did is she went in and she tried it with me, as opposed to saying, try this, best of luck to you.
And I think what you're saying is a sense of like, coaching can't be that precious, right? It can't be like, it's gonna work every single time, and if I'm a good coach, it's always gonna work. It's like sometimes seeing the underbelly of it, it's like, well, that didn't work. You know, we're never gonna tell anybody we did that. We're never gonna do that again. Let's reset.
We had a couple incidents like that, and I think the other piece too was not being judgy. You know, like Jess could be her true self with me, and I think we got to a place where she could tell me anything, and I would just say, okay, so I might not do that again, but here's how I might do that.
Do you remember the annex thing?
Okay, we gotta hear it.
Jessica was trying to explain annexing zeros as a mathematical concept and somehow got down the pathway of the Diary of Anne Frank and hiding in the annex in the Nazis, and then couldn't get herself out of it. So, and we just kind of said, okay, so I probably wouldn't go down the Nazi when we do that, but let's see if we can back up and do this a different way. And I was in the room when it was happening, and she was just kind of going down the rabbit hole, and I think that is an important thing. Like, you have to be able to have those days and be okay, right? And just kind of say, you know, well, all right, let's try not to do that again tomorrow, and let's see what we could do differently. And I think even sharing opportunities with her of times that I, you know, failed or messed up, I think makes yourself more human. That teaching is a human endeavor, so there's no such thing as perfect. And I think those now we can look back and laugh at them. I mean, we laughed.
We did, and I think the fact that she wasn't like, you shouldn't have done that, that didn't work. But the fact that we could laugh about it and say, that was so funny when you did this, we shouldn't do that anymore.
I love that you said it's a human endeavor, because before we can get to the kids, we got to get through ourselves, right? We got to make that work. Did you guys ever hit a snag or a time where you're like, there was a misunderstanding or something happened or whatever? Anything you had to work through that way, or were you pretty much on the up and up the whole time?
No, I don't think we ever. The only thing I would say is sometimes I would tell Jess things.
That's what I was going to say.
Because I think part of coaching is being honest, right? Yeah. So sometimes Jess would want me to answer something a different way. And so I think that we had some moments where she wouldn't want me to be right. And, or she wouldn't want to have to do what I was saying. But so we definitely had moments like that. But then I think I would just give her enough room to come back around, or to, you know, and Jess is such an just genuinely good person that she always wants to do what's best. So she would always come to this point of being like, okay, that's not the answer I wanted you to give. And then we got to a place where she would say, I'm going to ask you this, and I know what you're going to say, but I want you to try to say something different, you know? And then, so I would say that really is definitely.
And so it's funny because even now I like have this Megan voice in my head where I'll, you know, stamp my foot about something, you know, and I'll be like, I don't want to, and then I'll hear Megan be like, well, is that the best choice for kids? Or ultimately, what is your goal in this?
Does
that meet your goal? And I'd be like, no. But it was those kinds of questions where she wasn't saying you're wrong, but she was kind of encouraging me to reflect about ultimately my purpose, and then helped me to kind of find the right answer, which I didn't always want.
No. And sometimes you need some time to come back around to, right? It's like, let's think about that. And you come back around and you're like, okay, you know. And I think that's a real testimony for folks that are like, just because you're coaching doesn't mean the person's always going to like it. And also, it doesn't mean that they're going to take it right in that moment. It could be they need to chew on it for a couple of days and then come back around and be like, okay, I'm going to do it.
I think for me, sometimes that meant letting Jess do something that I knew wasn't going to work or wasn't necessarily the way I would do it, so that she could decide for herself. Because if she only did things because I told her to, then she's not learning. So sometimes when we'd be planning lessons, she would say, this is the way I want to do it. And I would say, well, have you thought about this? And she would say, no, this is definitely why I would do it. And I would say, okay, let's give it a shot. And then sometimes her idea would be great, but other times she would say, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that way. But it was better that, because as long as it was not, something dangerous or something like that, but as long as it was, I think sometimes you have to be willing to let the people you're coaching make their own way. And sometimes that means it's not perfect. And I think that usually went better when then Jess would come back around and say, okay, so maybe I shouldn't have done it that way, and here's why. I just think it made it more authentic.
Yeah.
I think one time I wanted to make a casino while I was teaching probability, and Megan's like, you can't do a casino.
No gambling.
In elementary.
You were very
Against the rules. It's a hard no.
I think that time I did not let you.
Yeah, you were like, that's a hard no.
Yeah. That was probably some good advice that I'm glad you did. Here's my final question. I'll ask Jess first and then Megan second. What advice do you give as some people who have been coached, but also as people who are now coaching? What advice do you give to coaches? Jess, what would you say?
So I think doing this job, I never really got trained on coaching. I got a bunch of, articles that were very fluffy in nature, but not very practical. And I actually saw you speak at Plain Talk last year. And I cried. My friend Caitlin was with me because I really
on the screen. I'm like, I totally remember her. I'm like, I know her.
Oh my God, Caitlin was like, do you think she'll remember you? I was like, no. She's
I not my name, but by your face when you came up, I'm like, yes.
You can't forget Jess.
Yeah.
And so I really felt like you were talking at me or to me in a lot of what you were saying. And so a lot of times the advice that I give other coaches are some of the things that you said in your presentation that really rang true to me, in this idea of especially being a younger coach. I think that that's a challenge when you go into work with teachers who have far more experience than you do. I'm getting ready to go to a school where I was a student for the next 3 weeks to do some coaching. Yeah. I was saying to Caitlin, I was like, some of these classrooms, I had accidents in. I was a coaching teacher in this room where I peed my pants 25 years ago.
Yes.
It's crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah.
So I think that this idea of being on the outside and being able to look in, and that balcony view, I think is huge in the fact that I can see things that you can't, because you're in it and you're overwhelmed by it. And being able to look from the outside in gives you this perspective that that teacher can't see. So no matter how young you are, how old you are, what level of experience you have, you're seeing things from a really different perspective.
Yes.
And then the other thing too, I think, is, again, being willing to go in and to model and to take on their kids and to teach alongside them and to help them develop resources and lessons, and to be really hands-on, because I think that that's one way that you build trust, is to say that these aren't your kids, this isn't your classroom, these are our kids, this is our classroom, and we're in it together.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that's really good advice. I think that's and I think it's obvious in talking to you guys how that was a theme between the two of you. It's let's just get in and do this. Let's try it, and that builds relationship and it mushes it all together in the best way with the kids and, and what we're trying to do and accomplish and all of that. Megan, what would you say advice for coaches?
I think listening is underrated. And I say that for teachers to listen to kids more, but I also think when you're coaching teachers And I mean listening differently than just hearing their words, because I think if you listen, a lot of what sometimes comes up as resistance belies a lack of confidence or belies a lack of understanding. So I think when you're coaching, if you really listen to what are the words they're saying, but what is it that they're really trying to communicate? What is it that they really need help with? And then once you have a deeper understanding of that, planning your entry point. So it's just like when you're teaching kids, you can't mark every single error on an essay or you'll shut people down, but really being strategic in what's my entry point with this teacher, what's something that I can coach them on that they're going to feel a measure of success, because I think success breeds more engagement. And so if you can give a teacher, you know, and I think back to some of our early days when Jess would feel that feeling when you teach a really great lesson or kids have that light bulb, then it's like, okay, I can do this. I can, now let's tackle the next challenge. So I think being very strategic in where you find your entry point with teachers. And then I think also, you know, to echo what Jess said, being authentic and really getting in there with them and not kind of opining on the side, but really digging in. I often tell them when I get the opportunity to work with them now, help needs to feel like help. And if it just feels like one more person judging or evaluating you, then that doesn't feel very helpful.